When you find a situation where you need some inspiration.
Alrighty, we've come to somewhat of the end of today's lesson about sketchnotes, and we're going to just dive into the resources. This will be short and sweet, but I wanted to make sure I gave my notes on where I found a lot of the information. So to start with, I know I mentioned in the last video we talked about podcasts and how important they are. For the secondary, I really would love to point out ListenWise. It is a collection of NPR podcasts that you can search by content, current event. I know we're looking at doing a grant for ELLs to have access in ListenWise. You actually have the ability to slow it down. Oftentimes on a lot of these podcasts, they normally talk super fast, so the ability to slow it down a little bit does help with the listening comprehension when you are first starting. So ListenWise is really great. I do think it definitely can be used for the upper elementary grades, 4th and 5th, but it definitely is a great option for middle school and high school. The rest of these on here, with the exception of YouTube and books for kids, because I think that they do mostly young adult books. I could be wrong, but Short and Curly, But Why, Tumble, and Brains On are some of my favorite podcasts, especially for the elementary level. They're all very science-based. Kids call in with questions, and then they seek out experts to find out the answer to the questions from the kids. So I really would recommend those, all free, online, easy to access. Then obviously don't forget about YouTube. I actually have a link in my resources, if you keep scrolling down below, for my 80 plus video playlist on YouTube of lessons or videos that I have personally used in my classroom as prompts or story starters, or just a great use for something like this with sketchnoting. So be sure to check that out. Also, I gave you access, obviously, to all of these. In terms of if you have access to iPads, and I know at the secondary level, less so at the elementary level, if you can get your hands on a cart of iPads, all of them should have the Paper by 53 app, which is free. You saw me actually using Procreate instead of Paper 53, just so that you could see that I was drawing on the same handout that you were drawing on. But most of the time when I go into classrooms, I like using Paper 53 because it's often what they have access to. If you feel like you want to go a little deeper on your own personal time, then I definitely would recommend Adobe Illustrator Draw. It allows you to have more pen options and to be able to do the different layering effects. Or if you want to shell out $2, I think it's like $2.99, $3.99, I could be wrong, for Procreate. That's typically what a lot of people use in the ed tech community when they are doing sketchnoting. So the one you saw me using was Procreate, which actually is not on this list that you see before you. So I would check that out if you are loving what we're talking about today. As far as sketchnoting on the Chromebooks, I mean, here's the thing. The Chromebooks are great for typing and searching the internet and that sort of thing. They're not the greatest at creative endeavors or, summative project pieces in terms of like video creation or something like that. It can be done, it's just a little bit messier than using the iPads. One of my favorite things or favorite ones to use, especially for the littler ones, is the first option here, Sketchpad or Sketchpad.io. Just open up a new tab, search for it, Sketchpad.io. It's one of the first ones that pops up. The kids can just get started right away. They don't have to make an account, so that's good for the under 13 age bracket because they can just use it without providing any information or anything like that. It's just a web browser. I also really like Sumo Paint and Awe app, but Sketchpad.io is one that the kids can just get started with right away. I oftentimes, again, I'll make this note one more time. My professional opinion after teaching this lesson so many times across the district, it's just not that first lesson where you're teaching the kids, just like you guys learned, going through and drawing all the icons and the face matrix and the whole stuff on the back with the typography and the arrows and everything. It can be done on the Chromebooks, but it just takes so much more time, and you're focusing so much more on the nitty-gritty details of doing the Chromebook application than you are on the actual piece of learning some of the more specifics about sketchnoting. So I often will go in and say, yeah, no, we're not using the Chromebooks. We're going to do it paper pencil. It's all about choosing the best tool for the job. I also really just like doing paper pencil because then the kids walk away with a cheat sheet that they can refer back to throughout the rest of the year. Whereas on the Sketchpad, like Sketchpad.io, it does save to your Google Drive, but it's not an infinite canvas. So if the kids start drawing gigantic things right away, then they're going to have it's just going to be split up into multiple pictures saved in their drive somewhere, which can begin to become cumbersome. And then if they do it on the iPads, again, they lose out on having that individual cheat sheet that they can refer back to because it's going to stay on their device, unless they sign into Google Drive and get it off of the iPad. So again, best tools for the job. I think that very first initial lesson, definitely would recommend doing the handout so that they have a cheat sheet. And then from there, if they want to make the decision, if you have access to the iPads, so they're going to use the iPads or they're going to use Chromebooks, or if they are a person that prefers to do paper pencil, they just have to make that choice at that time. All right, diving a little bit deeper, these are 3 of my personal favorite books when it comes to learning more about sketchnoting. I think the Sketchnote Handbook by Mike Rhodes is kind of a practice what you preach. The majority of the book itself is, in fact, visual notes, so it's not super text heavy. The Doodle Revolution, I'm a huge fan of Sunny Brown, and I like the message that she has behind kind of revolutionizing the negative connotation of doodling and how great it is to allow people to have that kind of creative outlet. It's a great book, but it definitely is thicker and has a lot more of the research behind why you would do what you do and exercises and different things like that. So I really do love that book. But then as it comes down to a teacher's guide to visual note taking, then obviously the Wendy Pilar's book is really fantastic. So those are my 3 favorite books. And then you also, if you keep kind of scrolling down on the Canvas page, you'll see all of the access to these links that I have off to the side. So you can jump into Flickr. There's a lot of people that share their sketch notes straight to Flickr. Ironically, you don't see very many of them showing up or appearing on Instagram. They're predominantly, the community has stayed in Flickr, which to me is kind of a old school program, but they're there. And then the webinar on Sketchnotes will kind of walk you through everything that we kind of did in one way or form, and it's about an hour and 20 minutes or so. It is a webinar that I did when I was very, very first learning about Sketchnotes. So if you feel like you would like to take more on this and you liked the concept of watching someone draw while you did it too, then that webinar would be a great place to go. Kathy Schrock's Guide to Everything Sketchnoting is a great resource. I also wanted to point out the very, very bottom one, the Brain Doodle lesson. So that was a doctoral thesis project for an art student, putting together, I think, 7 lessons. Yep, 7 lessons, predominantly made for secondary. So keep that in mind. If you are a 4th, 5th, 3rd grade teacher, they were meant for secondary, middle school, but high school, really. It was meant for high school, to try and get more students to actively be creative in cross-cultural disciplines. So the Brain Doodle Lessons is a really nicely put together website with 7 lessons ready to go to use in your classroom. But again, specifically geared towards that secondary level. Okay, so lots here on this resource page. Take it at your leisure, jump in, dive in, use it as much as you can. And I think that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this session, and I look forward to seeing not only your sketch notes, but what you do in the classroom. Thanks, guys.
There's an open invitation